I suppose I should start at the beginning, though beginnings are tricky things. Writers, like myself, are always fiddling with where the story starts. Do you open with a bang, an inciting incident, or something quieter? For me, the beginning was probably the day my first children's book was published. That was when everything really fell into place. It's funny how that kind of success has a way of unlocking things inside you. For me, it opened up a door I hadn't even realized was there, a dark, hidden place in my soul. But I digress. My name is Adrian Merrick, though you might know me as A.M. Warner, the author of the Fabled Friends series. Maybe your kids have read them, the whimsical tales of Chester the Squirrel and his woodland pals, teaching valuable life lessons through adventure and mischief. If you saw me at a book signing, you'd never think twice about who I really am. Middle-aged, glasses, a bit paunchy from too many hours behind the desk, I'm the quintessential harmless children's author. Or so people think. The truth is, there's another side of me. The side that comes out after the readings and interviews, after the obligatory smiles and handshakes, when I'm alone and the mask can finally drop. You see, I'm not just a writer. I'm also a killer. The duality of it fascinates me, the contrast between the light, playful world I create on the page and the blood-soaked one I live in when I step away from the keyboard. My career as a serial killer, if you want to call it that, didn't start with any grand design. There wasn't some traumatic childhood event that made me this way. I didn't grow up torturing animals or setting fires. No, it was much more subtle, like an itch that I didn't even know I had until the first time I scratched it. The first kill came during a book tour, of all things. I was in Cleveland, promoting Fabled Friends, Chester's big idea. There was this girl at the hotel bar, late 20s, blonde, looked like she was trying to forget something. I struck up a conversation. It wasn't difficult, people like to talk to someone who seems trustworthy. And let's face it, what's more disarming than a children's author? The more she drank, the more she revealed about herself. She told me her name was Kelly and that she was running from an abusive ex. I listened sympathetically, nodding at all the right moments, offering vague words of comfort. That's what I do. I blend in. I listen. I'm kind. By the time we made it to her room, she was so drunk she could barely stand. I helped her inside, even tucked her into bed. But as I watched her drift off into a stupor, something inside me snapped. It was like the itch I mentioned earlier, the one I hadn't known existed, suddenly screamed for attention. I grabbed a pillow and pressed it down on her face, hard. Her body jerked beneath me, weak and uncoordinated, her hands flailing for something to hold onto. It was quick. Too quick, actually. It didn't feel satisfying. That was my first lesson in this new craft. Killing is as much about the process as the result. Afterward, I sat on the edge of the bed, her lifeless body behind me, and felt nothing but a strange calmness. It was like a puzzle piece had fallen into place. And in the morning, I went to my book signing as though nothing had happened. The press loved the Fabled Friends series, and my audience grew with each installment. But what really thrilled me was the knowledge that I could kill, just like that, without anyone suspecting. The life of a successful author made it easy. I traveled constantly for book tours and events, moving from city to city, blending in with the crowds, my friendly demeanor and impenetrable mask. Each time I killed, I changed my methods, making sure never to repeat the same pattern. It was part of the game, part of the art, really. In New York, I pushed a man off a subway platform. It was chaotic, frenzied, and over in an instant as the train screeched in too late to stop. I disappeared into the crowd, heart pounding with excitement, feeling the rush of control and power. No one saw me. No one even noticed. The next morning, I was signing books at a children's store in Manhattan, smiling as a little boy told me how much he loved Chester and his adventures. The thought struck me then, as I ruffled his hair and thanked him, I could kill you. Right now, I could take you somewhere, and no one would stop me. But I didn't, of course. I have rules, after all. I don't harm children. I may be a killer, but I'm not a monster. The key to my success has always been variety. I take inspiration from the world around me, much like I do when writing. Every city offers new opportunities, new stories to tell. In Portland, I strangled a woman in her apartment, using a scarf I'd bought from a local shop earlier that day. In Chicago, I stabbed a man in an alleyway, his blood soaking into the cracks of the concrete like ink into a page. Each time, I left no trace behind, nothing that could tie me to the crime. I became a ghost, a shadow passing through the lives of my victims, leaving only terror in my wake. And all the while, my books flourished. The more successful I became as a writer, the more freedom I had to indulge my darker side. My publisher, Melissa, loved to joke that I had the best work ethic of any author she'd ever met. Little did she know that my discipline came not from some noble dedication to my craft, but from the fact that writing was merely the cover story for my real passion. You see, the murders are my true work. The books? They're just a distraction, a smokescreen to keep people looking the other way. They allow me to exist in plain sight, to travel without suspicion, to be welcomed into cities with open arms. It's almost too easy. The real thrill isn't the act of killing itself, it's the knowledge that I can do it whenever I want and get away with it. I've watched investigators pore over crime scenes, baffled by the lack of evidence. I've read the news reports, speculating about possible motives, trying to link the murders. They'll never figure it out because there's no pattern to find. I make sure of that. My MO changes with every kill. Sometimes I shoot, sometimes I strangle, sometimes I stab. I've used poison once, just to see if I liked it. I didn't, too impersonal. The methods vary, but the result is always the same, death, clean and absolute, followed by the disappearance of the predator back into the skin of the mild-mannered author. There's a peculiar beauty in it, really, the way I can compartmentalize my life so perfectly. During the day, I'm Adrian Merrick, beloved author, smiling for photos and signing books with neat, practiced signatures. But at night, I become something else entirely. A hunter, searching for the next moment when the mask can slip. There's a certain irony, I suppose, in writing children's stories about friendship and kindness while harboring such darkness inside. Sometimes I even laugh about it, how the parents at my signings, who tell me how much they appreciate my book's wholesome messages, have no idea they're standing next to a man who has killed more than a dozen people across the country. I wonder what they'd think if they knew. Would they still let their children read Fabled Friends? Would they still see me as harmless? The last kill was different. I'd been getting bolder, taking bigger risks, testing the limits of what I could get away with. I was in Los Angeles for a book convention, one of those massive events where hundreds of authors gather and fans swarm for autographs and selfies. It was perfect. The anonymity of the crowd made it so easy to disappear, to blend in. But I was starting to feel restless, like I needed something more. I chose a man this time, a businessman in his 40s, staying at the same hotel. We'd exchanged a few words at the bar, just enough to gauge that he was alone, no family, no one expecting him back soon. Later that night, I followed him to his room. It wasn't difficult to get him to open the door. People trust someone like me, someone who seems so ordinary. I used a knife this time, plunging it into his chest, watching the life drain from his eyes as his blood soaked the carpet. It should have been thrilling, but instead, I felt empty. That's when I realized something had changed. The thrill was fading. The more I killed, the less satisfaction I got from it. It was like an addiction, the high never lasted long enough, and I kept chasing it, hoping the next one would be different. But it wasn't. The kills were becoming routine, almost mundane. And that scared me. I thought about stopping. Maybe I'd reached the end of this particular chapter of my life. After all, I had my writing, my success. I could just walk away, let the killings become another part of my past, like an old manuscript shoved in a drawer and forgotten. But deep down, I knew that wasn't possible. The itch was still there, buried under the surface, waiting to be scratched.